we'll go around the room and introduce ourselves for the record.
Marla Cummings, Wood County Finance Director.
Tony Jostin, Mid-State Technical College Controller.
Dan Wagon, Business Director, Wisconsin Rapids School District.
Jerry Black, Public Member.
Excellent. Thank you all for being here. And on the phone today is Phil from Ehlers and Associates, who is giving our has been our counsel on the aspects with the TID creation and some of the other components.
So
I guess we'll move on to Adam Teagan. Sorry, for introduction purposes, I was pointing to you. Item number 2 on our agenda is the review and consideration of minutes from the organizational meeting, which were in our packets. Is there any discussion regarding the minutes? Discussion on the minutes, otherwise I'd look for a
Make a motion to accept the minutes.
second. A motion by Cummings, second by Bach to approve the minutes as presented. Moving to a vote, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. Item number 3 is review the public record, planning documents, plan commission resolution adopting the project plan, and the resolution passed by the common council approving the creation of the tax increment district project. And I should say. And all those items were distributed and are in front of us.
I did give it to everybody, right?
Yes.
That's the items I handed out. And then, Phil, I didn't know if you had any comments on just kind of the background or the history on what may have changed since last we met?
Yeah, I think I'll just give you a couple of quick comments, and then we can open it up for any questions that may come up. As you know, there are multiple approvals needed, and just so you know, the Plan Commission met after the Joint Review Board meeting on March 4th and unanimously approved the project plan, and that's the resolution you have available to you as well. And then the Common Council on March 19th met, and really very little comment or questions, or a few minor questions, not so much on the project plan, but the actual development. That was approved on March 19th unanimously as well, which brings it back to this group. The project plan itself has not changed from the preliminary. We do have a final opinion letter from the city attorney, which is the second last page on the document that's available in the project plan. And maybe a quick update, just so everybody's in the loop a little bit. There's a development agreement that is being worked on. There is a more recent draft of that development agreement that is allowing now for the possibility of this project maybe moving into the following year, depending on how quickly they can get their air permits, etc. So the development agreement is moving forward, which is great news for the city. It's kind of really what will drive the development more so than the project plan. The plan is allowing us to capture the increment. The development agreement is the agreement that speaks to, if we do X, you do Y, and that's moving forward very well. So I think everything is as what was presented in the past.
Excuse me, any questions related to the planning portion of the plan?
Phil, is that air quality state or federal permit that we're
Adam, do you want to give me an update on that?
Yeah, basically the DNR has we don't have any further restrictions than what the DNR has for air quality standards. So the DNR is the local agency to enforce the federal regulations. So it'll have to satisfy both state and federal air quality emission standards. So it sounds as if because of their other plants in Indiana and Ohio that they've already satisfied the federal requirements. So the question will be are there any further requirements at the state level? So while this plant is a replica and it gives us some confidence that the air permit shouldn't be problematic, based upon the presentation they gave actually at the city council level maybe 3 weeks ago, when we asked some questions about emissions and sort of what are the things that might be of concern with a time frame standpoint. But it sounds as if the DNR is the permitting agency for the EPA components. They didn't cite any federal permitting, additional permitting than what the state has to go through. Other questions on the project plan? Phil, did you want to talk about it any other? We've got the resolution in front of us, both for the planning commission approval that Phil had referenced, as well as the council's consideration back in March.
Yeah, the final resolution that's in your packet is the approval by the Joint Review Board. If that is approved today, then we will assemble all the information. There's a packet that gets submitted to the state of Wisconsin to the Department of Revenue, and then they'll do their final review of all the material, and then ultimately certify the tax increment district. So it's really the last step before submittal to the state.
And as Phil had indicated, the developers agreement process is moving forward productively. The original proposal remains unchanged of the $80 million, the about $4 million in annual payroll, the $8 million of minimum assessment. The question is when, based upon the permitting, as is indicated, that's still an item out there. When will they meet their $8 million test to receive the rest of the the incentives that have been packaged in the program or in the proposal? So that's really the outstanding or controlling item, is buttoning up the developers agreement, and then of course the outstanding permit that has to be granted to the project.
Mayor, of the 50 acres they're looking at, it's my understanding they're going to build in the front part of it first, is that right? Part
Right.
most adjacent to 48th Street?
Correct, along 48th Street, and then
And your concern was that they would then expand to the back? Yeah.
right, yep.
Okay.
And so the line of trees is expected to be preserved along 48th Street, so if you're looking at page
Yeah.
9, and then the rail spur, there'll be some stormwater detention ponds to the south there as well. That'll have to be created, that we're still working through some components on the site, actual site plan, which I indicated will follow. We were just talking through some of the project details here.
Okay, yeah, I can try and bring up a state plan while you're talking on it, if I can get to Google Drive.
Does the rail spur extend that far right now, or would it have to be
It
extended?
just goes up
It
to
will,
48.
it'll extend across 48.
Yeah.
Okay, so that'll have to be. Who pays for that?
That's part of the in the project plan that they would qualify for a state grant, a transportation grant to construct, which will help offset, based upon the job creation, offset a portion of the construction costs of the rail spur. But the TID is expected to cover a portion of those costs. I think it's $600,000 was the rail spur estimate that we put in the project costs, the project plan, and then 5,000, is it 5,000 per job will be, is it eligible?
T grant?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's 5,000 per job. So that would cover potentially half of that, or 300,000.
Okay, I see 600.
I need this for plan commission anyway.
I think the bottom, Adam, you can zoom in. Yeah.
Whoa. Maybe. Yeah. So that's the overall site plan. So I think what the mayor was saying, the tree line would be preserved. Oh, that's a touch screen. So the rail spur, you can see them. Ultimately, I think the design may change. I think the city, just depending what's going to happen here and how much of a budget they may look to extend the rail spur all the way to the east side of this LBOT. And they would construct basically that parallel spur that would go directly into theirs, so that would be 100% at their cost. Were there any other?
Is that a stormwater pond right at the bottom there?
Yeah, they're
Yeah.
proposing it there. That's similar to what was done on the west side, where the
Okay.
stormwater ponds are actually on
Okay.
city property. Again, we'd probably have to do a slight redesign because we want the spur to be able to get through there.
Mhm.
So yes, they're not sure. They're still working out the finer details because I don't think you're going to get the whole site to drain south. So there likely will have to be a smaller pond on the north as well. Because it's an awfully flat piece of property if you've ever been out there. So expecting everything to magically go one direction might be a little bit hard in the long run. And then the property that could come back to the city basically would be from this 40 line split. It would go so this would be the portion that could come back to the city, and then they would retain the west portion if a second phase does not take place.
And I think at present, the developers agreement calls for that expansion to happen within 10 years.
Which would, if that happened, that could allow the TIF to close even faster, ideally, because that would be additional tax base that at this point, there isn't any expectation for additional incentive.
Right now, is there plan for that expansion more of, as you mentioned, Mayor, a sorting area and so on, or is it more just buildings too?
I think the easiest way is I think they call it a non-ferrous metal recycler.
Okay.
So it would be bringing in scrap, processing, sorting, getting it ready basically for shipping out to customers. So it's not a salvage yard in the concept of it's like cars coming in and being broken down. It would be more industrial scrap, similar to what this plant will process,
Okay.
but that type of thing. And again, kind of sorting and getting it ready for distribution. So a little more labor intensive, still would have a fairly substantial building, but it could be more jobs than even this space.
And for the purposes of the joint review board, we have the next item on our agenda is the resolution. So if there's no further discussion, Phil, did you have anything further on item 3?
No, nothing else, Mayor, thank you.
So if I don't have any further questions, we'll move on to item number 4, which is consideration of a resolution approving tax increment district number 8. Which is, we should have a copy for them. I won't read it, but if there's any questions pertaining to this, I can answer them. We'll call for approval.
I'll make the motion.
We have a motion by Cummings to approve as presented. Is there a second? Second by Wiegand. Any further discussion? Anything else from staff on that?
No, it's a fairly standard resolution. It's going to be very similar to obviously the resolutions approved by the Plan Commission and the City Council.
We have a motion and a second. We'll move into a vote. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you. We'll move on to item number 5, review annual PE 300 reports and the performance and status of. Item A is the tax increment district number 6 and B tax increment district number 7. So Tim, you're going to take those items?
Okay, you should all gotten copies of that in your packet. Copy. This next one here.
That was done by you, so it probably wasn't in your packets.
Oh.
As Taylor sent out the packets. So
Oh,
this is
okay.
follow-up.
Thank you.
Agenda. Yeah. My bad.
Sorry for that. Okay, well, these are very simple because there wasn't a lot of activity other than transfers to debt service. So we'll go through on page 1 of 3 of tax incremental district number 6. Basically, you see that it kind of goes through the revenues. You see there Allied Cooperative, that's a developers agreement we had with them where they guaranteed X amount of increment. And based on what their assessed value is at, we assess them $31,254 because they're below that guaranteed increment. So we're showing that revenue is being collected. If you go down, you see tax increment, we've collected $343,151 in 2018 for that. Investment income of $1,402. Exempt computer aid of $1,623. And the sale of property is we have a note payable with EC Corrosions when we sold them the land back in '07, I do believe, for $75,000. There was a deferred note payable on that, and so we're collecting basically $2,000 a month. And I think the balance of that is down to $22,000, so we're showing that we collected $24,000 on that in 2018 for total revenues of $401,394. We flip the page, kind of go over to the expenditures. The only expenditures other than debt service, of which was a transfer to the debt service fund of $280,000 for principal and $72,474 for interest on the notes that we issued to put in the infrastructure into the Rapids East Commerce Center. We have professional services of $3,540, and that was for a update to the wetlands delineation. And then DUR fees, of which we assessed as $150 per tax incremental district annually each year, for total expenditures of $356,000. So the TID fund balance of the fiscal year at the end of the fiscal year is $118,770. And when I project out based on our development that we have today and the bonds, note payments that we have, and any expected expenditures, we're looking at at the end of the tax incremental life of a surplus of $151,753. If there's any questions on that district?
Yeah, what is the city able to do with that surplus? What are the options?
At the end of the life, any surplus is returned on a pro rata basis back to the taxing jurisdictions. So when we close out the TIF, if we have a surplus, then we basically divvy it up and you get a check for your pro rata share.
So it's not rolled into another TIF?
No.
Okay.
Not unless the Joint Review Board would approve that.
And there's also a housing, isn't there a carve-out for housing within, maybe Phil or Adam would know that, with the
Yeah, I
surplus at the end of
can
it?
comment on that if you would like. Even though I'm not part of this meeting, I will. There is an allowance that if once a district has met its expenditures and has collected enough increments to pay back all existing obligations, that you can keep the district open for up to 1 year, collect one additional year